So wow. Okay, that's something. That's something I didn't know. Okay, so much information. Anasoma mbio, but nita highlight. I will highlight everything that nimeelewa so far, and then I will put it nitaiweka hapo chini for people to understand it. But I just want to let's follow what he's saying. At least tuta end up to discuss about it. Oh, you can't hear the TV. Let me check. Hiyo ndo nilikuwa nauliza. Thank you Zaro. Thank you. Let me work on it. Thank you. Tuko salama. Let me work on the sound ya TV sahi tu. Okay, just a minute. I'm working on it. Share screen. Yeah, thank you.
These entities held Kenya shillings.
Now, Zaro, can you hear the TV audio? Just confirm, please. Asante sana, tuko salama, Priscilla Zawadi. Zaro, please confirm we can hear the TV now. Yes, it's.
Mr. Speaker, to address this challenge and underscore the government's unwavering commitment for fiscal discipline, transparency, and efficiency in the management of public finances, the Cabinet approved the implementation of Treasury Single Account System in a clustered approach. The system will consolidate
Zalo, please confirm for me. Someone confirm to me unaweza sikia audio TV.
Sub-treasury single accounts.
Salama, iko sawa. Thank you Priscilla. Thank you. It's set into hatujazoea historia live stream, tutaizoea sasa. Nikusoma daily.
The government financial position is known and ascertained.
So guys, I just want you to follow along the budget, and then hapo chini nitaweka the points napata, and then we can discuss it later when he's done. But he is almost done.
Agenda. Mr. Speaker, let me turn the highlights to government spending priorities in the coming financial year. And in light of the revenue challenges, significant expenditure demands, spending in the financial year 2024 to 2025 will focus on bottom-up economic transformation agenda priorities on 5 core areas with the highest impact on the economy. The first one will be agricultural transformation and inclusive growth. Mr. Speaker, the government focus will be on agricultural transformation and inclusive growth through the value chains approach. This aims at providing adequate and affordable working capital to all farmers through cooperative societies. This, we consider them as aggregators, and deploy the modern agricultural risk management instruments that ensure farming is profitable and incomes are predictable. In addition, it aims to transform farmers from food deficit to surplus producers through input finance, subsidies, and intensive agricultural extension support. This will raise productivity of key food value chains, reduce dependence on basic food imports, revamp underperforming export crops, and expand to new high-value emerging crops.
Thank you, Alfred.
Key value chain through trading. Mr. Speaker, to attain food and nutrition security, I proposed an allocation of Kenya shillings 54.6 billion for various programs under this sector. This includes Kenya shillings 10 billion for the fertilizer subsidy program, Kenya shillings 6.1 billion for the National Agricultural Value Chain Development Project, Kenya shillings 2.5 billion for the Enable Youth Program, Kenya shillings 2.4 billion for the Enable Youth and Women in Agriculture, Kenya shillings 747 million for small scale.
Thank you guys. And if you have something to comment, you can comment, guys. We really appreciate your input. I really appreciate it.
Diversification project.
Yeah.
Mr. Speaker, to improve livestock production, I propose Kenya shillings 2.4 billion for
Coming.
de-risking, inclusive, and value enhancement of pastoral economies program. Kenya shillings 1.5 billion for livestock value chain support project. Kenya shillings 1.5 billion for Kenya livestock commercialization program. Kenya shillings 192.5 million for the embryo transfer project. I have also proposed Kenya shillings 300 million for the development leather industrial park, Kenyan. Mr. Speaker, to support the growth of the brew economy, I propose a total of Kenya shillings 11.3 billion to the brew economy and fisheries subsector. This includes 3.7 billion to aquaculture business development project. Kenya shillings 3.1 billion to the Kenya Marine Fisheries and Socio-Economic Development Project. Kenya shillings 540 million for rehabilitation of fish riding sites. Kenya shillings 695.5 million for Riwatoni Ultra Modern Fish Hub, and Kenya shillings 600 million for marine fish assessment. Mr. Speaker, to raise agricultural productivity, enhance resilience to climate change risks in targeted smallholder farming and even pastoral communities, I propose an allocation of 340 million shillings towards adding drought and emergencies project. Mr. Speaker, to ensure legitimacy of RAD ownership and settle the RAD race, I propose a sum of 5.5 billion. This allocation will cater for the processing and registration of the title deeds, settlement of the RAD race, digitization of the RAD registry, georeferencing of RAD parcels, and construction of RAD registries. Second, I want to turn to transforming micro, small, and medium enterprises economy. Mr. Speaker, accessibility and affordable credit to most Kenyans at the bottom of the pyramid remains a challenge. To address this challenge, the government is proposing an additional allocation of 5 billion shillings to the Financial Inclusion or Hustlers Fund to scale up access to credit for households and MSMEs. I also propose an additional 200 million for the Youth Enterprise Development Fund, Kenya shillings 162.5 million for the Center for Entrepreneurship Project, and Kenya shillings 1.9 billion for rural Kenya Financial Inclusion Facility. Third, let me turn to housing and settlement, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the government's commitment to turn the housing challenge into an economic opportunity to create quality jobs for the youth directly in the construction sector and indirectly through the production of building products. This will be achieved through, among other measures, facilitating a delivery of 200,000 houses per annum and enabling low-cost housing mortgages. To continue supporting this initiative, I have proposed an allocation of 92.1 billion shillings for the housing, urban development, and public works. This includes Kenya shillings 8.3 billion under the Kenya Urban Program, Kenya shillings 3 billion to Kenya Mortgage Refinance Company for enhancement of the company's capital as well as for lending to the primary mortgage lenders, Kenya shillings 32.5 billion for construction of affordable housing units, Kenya shillings 15 billion for the construction of social housing unit, Kenya shillings 14.7 billion for social and physical infrastructure. Mr. Speaker, other proposed allocation to the housing, urban development, and public works include 11.3 billion for the Kenya Informal Settlement Improvement Project Phase 3, Kenya shillings 1 billion for the construction of markets, Kenya shillings 1 billion for the National Slum Upgrading Program, Kenya shillings 1 billion for the construction of housing units for the National Police and Kenya prisons, Kenya shillings 496.3 million for the construction of food bridges, Kenya shillings 444 million targeted to support construction of county headquarters that are targeted. Fourth, universal healthcare coverage. Mr. Speaker, the government is committed and determined to realize the constitutional right to health by promoting access to quality and affordable healthcare through universal healthcare coverage program. Towards this end, Mr. Speaker, I have proposed an allocation of 127 billion to the health sector to support various activities and programs. These include 4.2 billion for the Kenya shillings, 4.2 billion for universal healthcare coverage, coordination and management unit, Kenya shillings 2 billion for free
Sorry
maternity
guys,
health care.
I was dealing with a client.
For managed equipment
Niko na
services.
client kwa ofisi
Kenya
but
shillings
it's okay being live here na shida.
861.5 million to provide medical
Ah,
cover
ah,
for
ah.
the
Our
orphans,
discussion is
elderly, and
private. I
severely
admitted everything.
disabled persons in our
Hakuna nini.
society. Kenya shillings 4.2
Ni sura tu
billion for
imeonekana
equipment
kidogo.
hardware and acquisition of specialized medical
But our
equipment for the
discussion is
community
private.
health
Sija nini.
promoters and
So
4.1
guys,
billion shillings for primary health care fund.
there is so much
Mr.
about this
Speaker,
nini.
throughout the cases of HIV, AIDS, malaria, and tuberculosis, and enhance the vaccines and immunization program in the country, I have proposed Kenya shillings 28.7 billion for the Global Fund and Kenya shillings 4.6 billion for vaccines and immunization programs, respectively. Mr. Speaker, to enhance the early diagnosis and management of cancer and reduce the burden of treatment among Kenyans, I have proposed an allocation of Kenya shillings 1.1 billion to strengthen cancer management in Kenyatta National Hospital and Kisii Level 5 hospitals. I have also proposed Kenya shillings 2 billion to the Emergencies, Chronic and Critical Illness Fund. Mr. Speaker, to improve health delivery services, health service delivery, I have proposed a sum of Kenya shillings 29.7 billion for Kenyatta National Hospital and Moi Teaching and Referral Hospitals. This include 2.6 billion for the construction of Kenyatta National Hospital Burns and Pediatric Center. I've also proposed Kenya shillings 5.2 billion for the Kenya Medical Supplies Agency, Kenya shillings 2.5 billion for the Kenya Medical Research Institute, Kenya shillings 1 billion for procurement of family planning and reproductive health commodities, and Kenya shillings 760 million for procurement of equipment at the National Blood Transfusion Services. Further, to strengthen the capacity of medical personnel, I have proposed Kenya shillings 3.7 billion for medical interns, Kenya shillings 406 million for training of health personnel, and Kenya shillings 8.6 billion for Kenya Medical Training Center. Finally, the digital superhighway and creative economy. Mr. Speaker, investment in digital superhighway and creative economy continues to play a critical role in enabling the government achieve the objectives of bottom-up economic transformation agenda through increased productivity and competitiveness. On the creative economy promotion and of music, theater, and graphic design, digital animation, fashion, and craft, among others, continues to create jobs opportunities for the youth. Mr. Speaker, to support the growing digital superhighway and creative economy, I have proposed an allocation of Kenya shillings 16.3 billion to fund the initiatives in the information, communication, and technology sector.
Okay, that's good news. Yeah, good news.
This proposed allocation includes 1.1 billion for government shared services, 704 million for digital superhighway, 2.3 billion for the construction of Kenya Advanced Institute of Science and Technology at Concert Technopolis, 2.8 billion for Kenya Digital Economy Acceleration Project, and 2.8 billion for maintenance and rehabilitation of the last mile county connectivity network.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Development of the Concert Technopolis City, I have proposed an allocation of 1.5 billion for the horizontal infrastructure phase 1.
What happened to Konza, guys? You can comment what really happened to Konza, because I have no idea what happened to Konza.
And smart city facilities.
What really happened? I should investigate what really happened in Konza, because before Ruto, before Uhuru,
critical infrastructure. Mr. Speaker, the government continues to expand and maintain critical infrastructure in roads, railways, sea, and airports to achieve socio-economic transformation that will also enhance Kenya's competitiveness and facilitate cross-border trade and regional integration. Towards this end, I have proposed an allocation of Kenya shillings 193.4 billion for development of roads. This includes 86.2 billion to support construction of roads and bridges, Kenya shillings 37.7 billion for the rehabilitation of roads, and Kenya shillings 69.5 billion for road maintenance. Mr. Speaker, to expand the railway transport and even associated infrastructure, I have proposed Kenya shillings 25.2 billion. I've also proposed Kenya shillings 2.4 billion for infrastructure development at Dogokudu Special Economic Zone, Kenya shillings 1 billion for Nairobi Bus Rapid Transport Project, Kenya shillings 316 million for promotion of e-mobility project, and Kenya shillings 239.4 billion for the development of Nairobi Railway City. To facilitate movement of goods and people in our inland waters, I have proposed an additional Kenya shillings 200 million for acquisition of ferries for Lake Victoria. Mr. Speaker, to scale up production of reliable and affordable energy, I have proposed an allocation of 69.7 billion to the energy subsector. This includes Kenya shillings 27.8 billion for the national grid system, Kenya shillings 24 billion for rural electrification, Kenya shillings 14 billion for the development of geothermal energy, Kenya shillings 2.2 billion for the alternative energy technologies, and Kenya shillings 920 million for the development of nuclear energy. Mr. Speaker, I now turn to improving education outcomes. The government continues to invest in education to improve education outcomes and create a level playing field for all Kenyan children. Mr. Speaker, from this end, I have proposed a total allocation of 656.6 billion, or 27.6% of total expenditures to the education sector. This includes Kenya shillings 358.2 billion to the Teacher Service Commission, Kenya shillings 142.3 billion for basic education, Kenya shillings 128 billion for higher education and research, Kenya shillings 30.7 billion for technical vocational educational training. Mr. Speaker, the allocation of the education sector includes Kenya shillings 9.1 billion free primary education, 61.9 billion shillings for free day secondary education, Kenya shillings 30.7 billion for junior secondary school capitation, and Kenya shillings 5 billion for the examinations fee waiver. In addition, Mr. Speaker, I have proposed an allocation of Kenya shillings 13.4 billion for the conversion of 46,000 junior secondary school interns to permanent and pensionable terms. Kenya shillings 1.3 billion for the training of teachers on competency-based curriculum, and Kenya shillings 360 million for the digital literacy program and ICT integration in our secondary schools. Mr. Speaker, to support infrastructure development and ensure safe learning in our schools, I have proposed an allocation of Kenya shillings 3.2 billion for primary and secondary schools infrastructure, Kenya shillings 1 billion for construction of classroom for junior secondary schools, and Kenya shillings 2.3 billion for the construction and equipping of technical training institutes and vocational training centers. Further, I have proposed Kenya shillings 11.1 billion for the Kenya primary education equity in learning program, Kenya shilling 1.8 billion for construction of integrated resource centers, and Kenya shillings 1.5 billion for the Kenya secondary education quality improvement project. Mr. Speaker, other proposed allocations to the education sector include Kenya shillings 1.1 billion for the research, science and technology innovation. Mr. Speaker, the government is implementing the new funding model for public universities and TVET institutions through the provision of government scholarships and loans apportioned according to students' need. The new funding framework seeks to offer students whose households are at the bottom of the pyramid equal opportunity in accessing university education, as well as technical training. Towards this end, Mr. Speaker, I have proposed an allocation of Kenya shillings 35.9 billion to the Higher Education Loans Board for provision of loans to university and TVET students. Kenya shillings 16.9 billion for the scholarship for university students, and Kenya shillings 7.7 billion capitation and scholarship for TVET students. Let me move now to supporting manufacturing for job creation. Mr. Speaker, further to promote local industries, I have proposed an allocation of Kenya shillings 23.7 billion under various implementing ministries, departments, and agencies. Out of these, 4.5 billion will support establishment of county integrated agro-industrial parks, Kenya shillings 1.9 billion for supporting access to finance and enterprise recovery SAFA project, Kenya shillings 1.1 billion for construction of investor sheds in Athi River, Kenya shillings 1.9 billion for for establishment of 6 flagship export processing zones hubs, Kenya shillings 440 million to the development of special economic zones textile park in Naivasha, and Kenya shillings 1 billion for the Kenya Jobs Economic Transformation KJET. In addition, Mr. Speaker, in order to revitalize and maximize benefits from our cash crops, the government will make further investments towards revival and enhancement of output. In this respect, Mr. Speaker, I have proposed Kenya shillings 2 billion for coffee cherry revolving fund. This is in addition to Kenya shillings 4 billion allocated in the current fiscal year. Kenya shillings 1.5 billion for payments of debts.
And unajua watu wa coffee wajalipo mpaka sasa. Like seriously, we are yet to be paid our coffee rates. Tumezoea
Kenya shillings 120 million for cotton industry revitalization.
The promise is so huge, but the action is almost nothing.
For the pyrethrum industry recovery.
Kunywa maji baba.
Mr. Speaker, in order to reduce over-reliance of the importation of edible oils and encourage local production and processing, I have proposed Kenya shillings 90 million for the coconut industry revitalization project, Kenya shillings 260 million for the National Edible Oils Crop Promotion Project, and an allocation to National Agricultural Value Chain Development Project, which includes support for cashew nut development. Mr. Speaker, to enhance milk processing, I have proposed Kenya shillings 1.5 billion for excess milk mop-up, Kenya shilling 500 million for modernization of KCC milk factories, and Kenya shillings 250 million for the construction of a milk factory in Narok. Mr. Speaker, to equip our youth with essential training and internship opportunities, I have proposed an allocation of 1.3 billion for the Kenya Industry and Entrepreneurship Project, Kenya shillings 119.9 million for the construction of industrial research laboratories, and Kenya shillings 114.3 million for the constituency industrial development centers. I will now turn into improving security, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, enhanced national security creates an enabling environment for businesses to thrive while aiding faster economic recovery. It is in this regard, I have proposed an allocation of 377.5 billion to support the operations of the National Police Service, Defense, and National Intelligence Service and Prison Services. Mr. Speaker, the proposed allocations include Kenya shillings 173.1 billion for defense, 110.6 billion for National Police Service, 46.3 billion for the National Intelligence Service, and Kenya shillings 32.7 billion for prison services. I have proposed an allocation of 13.9 billion to cater for leasing police motor vehicles and the modernization program. Mr. Speaker, to step up the war on crime and embrace support to administration of justice, I have proposed Kenya shillings 918.4 million to equip the National Forensic Laboratory. Protecting the vulnerable groups, Mr. Speaker, as a caring government, we shall continue to protect the vulnerable members of our society. I have in this regard proposed an allocation of 31.3 billion for social protection and affirmative actions in this budget. Mr. Speaker, out of this allocation, Kenya shillings 18.6 billion will cater for cash transfers to elderly persons, 7.9 billion for orphans and vulnerable children, Kenya shillings 1.2 billion for persons living with severe disabilities. Mr. Speaker, the proposed allocation includes 1.5 billion for the Kenya Hunger Safety Net Program, Kenya shillings 1.9 billion for the Kenya Social and Economic Inclusion Project. In addition, 815 million will go to Child Welfare Society of Kenya, 400 million to the Presidential Bursary for the orphans, Kenya shillings 600.1 million for National Council for Persons Living with Disabilities, and Kenya shillings 100 million for the National Albinism Support Program, and Kenya shillings 100 for National Autism Support Program. Let me turn to equity, poverty reduction, women and youth empowerment. Mr. Speaker, the most pressing challenge in our country at the moment is lack of jobs or job opportunities for the youth. This has been exacerbated by the multiple shocks that have hit our economy And in order to empower the youth and support businesses owned by the youth and women, I've proposed Kenya shillings 89.5 billion for these initiatives. This allocation includes 10.4 billion for the National Youth Service.
So guys, these are just allocations. Hopefully akona vitu ataongezea. So the budget is just allocating money to different things, some are different places wana viable. So I just want to, I'm waiting to hear the changes of, because there are so many changes zina happen. I just hope kuna vitu anaguza za kuongezea tax. Hizo ndo tunangoja tuone what is what. But one thing I've heard, if you are just joining the stream ama hujajua, ni banking sector imeingiwa kidogo, the coffee sector. So hopefully there is a fund for the cherry beans. Yeah, so I just highlight it. I have someone working on the highlights. Nitawasomea vizuri sahi.
Reduce poverty and enhance social development. I have proposed Kenya shillings 63 billion for the National Government Constituency Development Fund, as well as Kenya shillings 8.08 billion for the Equalization Fund to finance programs identified in marginal areas. Let me turn now to
CDF imeongezewa do.
Sports, culture, and recreation and arts. Mr. Speaker, the government has prioritized expanding the space for creativity, including freedom of expression and protection of intellectual property rights. The government will also strengthen mainstreaming of arts and culture, infrastructure and support cultural production, and as well as creative economy. We are also cognizant of the brand value of Kenyans participating and exerting in international sports arena as incalculable. To support tourism, sports, culture, and even recreation, I have proposed an allocation of 23.7 billion, and this includes an allocation of 16.5 billion for the Sports, Arts, Social Development Fund, Kenya shillings 4.9 billion for the Tourism Fund, and Kenya shillings 2.2 billion for the Tourism Promotion Fund. Let me turn to environment protection, water and natural resources. Mr. Speaker, in order to support environment and water conservation and respond to climate change, I have proposed an allocation of Kenya shillings 10.7 billion for forest resources conservation and management, 1.7 billion for forest research and development, 2.7 billion for environment management and protection, 5.9 billion for the Kenya Financing Locally Led Climate Action Project, 1.6 billion for meteorological services, and Kenya shillings.
But the guys who do research,
security, conservation, and management. In addition, Mr. Speaker, I've proposed Kenya shilling 1 billion for wildlife research and development.
So if guys, if you are interested in research, the budget should be your biggest praise unafaa kusikiza ni wapi wako nini Okay. So there is another question here by Explore Masai.
1.9 billion for water storage and flood control.
Nitakujibu Masai after the budget.
17.8 billion for irrigation and land reclamation. Kenya shillings 1.9 billion for water harvesting and storage for irrigation. And now turn to improving governance and sustaining the fight against corruption. To enhance good governance and Mr. Speaker, and scale up fight against corruption, I have proposed Kenya shillings 4.2 billion for the
Yeah, I meant that. If you really need a plot in Moro, go ahead and buy.
Office of Director
But
of
kama uhitaji, achana kununua.
6.9 billion for the State Law Office, 8.7 billion for the Office of the Auditor General.
So who can answer my friend Anthony Karundu, digital superhighway ni nini? Nani atajibu mtu wangu? Nani atajibu mtu wangu digital superhighway ni nini? So
enable administration and justice, I propose an allocation of 24.7 billion for the judiciary. This includes 900 million for construction and refurbishment of courts and 800 million.
So what is the digital superhighway? Anyone to comment?
I turn to this. County governments will receive a proposed allocation of
mtu ajibu digital superhighway ni nini?
In the financial year 2024-2025. is for the first time that they have arrived to this figure of 400 and surpassed it in the last 12 years of devolution. As equitable share of financial year 2024-2025, and this is equivalent to 25.48% of the actual revenue raised nationally for the financial year 2020-2021, which is in compliance with Article 203, subsection 2 of the Constitution of Kenya. In addition to the equitable share of revenue, a further 44.4 billion has been proposed as additional allocation to county governments. This comprises of 8.76 billion for the national government share of revenue, Kenya shillings 35.66 billion from proceeds of external loans and grants for the external loans and grants. Equalization Fund, Mr. Speaker, we have proposed an allocation of 8 billion for the Equalization Fund, which is
50-50. Johi Mike ametusalimia, tumesalimika men, thank you. Salim Mashira anasema Zakayo. So kujibu mtu wangu hapa, so
the enhancement of own source revenue by county governments as we await the enactment of the National Rating Bill. This bill will enable the county governments to correct more property rates, including contribution in lieu of rates. In addition, Mr. Speaker, a multi-agency committee has been formed to manage the rollout of the proposed integrated county revenue management system in 47 county governments. This system will increase transparency, accountability, and efficiency in revenue collection. Let me turn now to taxation measures, Mr. Speaker.
Sasa tumeingia sasa kwa tax. Watu wangu tumeingia kwa tax. Tuko kwa tax sasa, chata nibadilisha sasa. We are at the tax area.
The policy measures to support the budget, the tax policy measures supporting the budget for the financial year 2024-2025 budget.
Liko level, bwana.
In this course of the year, in the course of this year,
this is what we have been waiting for. So thank you for guys.
A number of tax studies that will support the development of a progressive tax system.
Okay.
Mr. Speaker, the objective of these reforms is to develop an elaborate tax policy that will raise adequate revenue to finance the current as well as development budgets. For this to materialize, we intend to first to develop diverse methods to enlarge the tax base. Second, we want to make sure that we minimize tax expenditures that amount to Kenya shilling 396 billion, which is equivalent to 2.9% of GDP as of 2022. Of the Kenya shillings 396 billion, 63.1% of it is on VAT refunds alone on zero-rated final consumer goods. Third, we want to create a tax system that is not only predictable to taxpayers, but also yields predictable revenues to government. Fourth, we want to develop a tax system that supports markets, that supports production, consumption, and even investments. Mr. Speaker, thank you. Mr. Speaker, the year 2024-2025 marks the beginning of these reforms. The proposed amendments in various tax laws contained in the Finance Bill 2024. Mr. Speaker, these reforms are part of a wider tax policy reforms contained in the medium-term revenue strategy, and I will shortly be providing highlights of these reforms. Additionally, Mr. Speaker, during the East African Community pre-budget consultations held in May 2024, the ministers responsible for finance and economic planning in the East African Community region agreed on customs measures that will support and protect industries in the region. Mr. Speaker, the tax measures proposed in the Finance Bill 2024 and the said custom measures are expected to generate an additional Kenya shillings 346.7 billion or 1.9% of GDP to the exchequer for the financial year 2024-2025. Let me start with custom duties. Mr. Speaker, allow me to provide highlights of some of the custom measures agreed during the pre-budget consultation with the East African community partner states. Mr. Speaker, the ministers agreed on a number of measures for enhancing the competitiveness of locally manufactured products by allowing stays of application for the East African Community Common External Tariff, not to change the rates, and where necessary, adopt higher rates of duty to encourage local production in East African Community countries. The ministers also agreed on duty remissions for raw materials and inputs used by local manufacturers to facilitate East African Community domestic production. Mr. Speaker, in order to meet local demands and enhance food security in Kenya,
Karibu.
on key staple foods, Kenya was granted an extension of the current stay of application of to import rice at a duty rate of 35% or US $200 per metric ton, whichever is higher, for 1 year, instead of East African Community Common External Tariff rate of 75% or $345 per metric ton, whichever is higher. And also, Kenya was allowed to import wheat at a duty rate of 10% instead of 5% for 1 year under the EAC, East African Community Duty Remission Scheme.
So what I'm writing is
Kenya
all the
has a strong
taxes.
assembly of electronics industry, including mobile phones. In order to further open up the ICT sector to more investors, Kenya requested for duty remission on inputs for manufacture and assembly of smart telecommunication devices, including mobile phones, laptops, and tablets. This request was granted. Mr. Speaker, the local assembly of automotives continues to facilitate job creation with positive ripple effects in other supportive sectors, especially in the manufacturing of spare parts. In this regard, Kenya continued to develop capacity in the assembly of prime movers, road tractors, trailers, to meet both local and regional demand. In order to safeguard this capacity, Kenya was granted a stay of application of East African Common External Tariff rate of 10% to apply a duty rate of 25% for prime movers and 35% for trailers for 1 year. Further, in order to continue supporting the assembly of motorcycles in the region, East African Community ministers in this regard agreed to extend the duty remission on importation of raw materials for the manufacture of parts used in the assembly of motorcycles, including leaf springs and wiring harness. In addition, ministers agreed to extend duty remission for completely knocked down kits for assembly of motorcycles at the rate of 10%. Mr. Speaker, the growth of investment in metal and allied subsector has enhanced the capacity to manufacture various iron and steel products in the region. To safeguard the gains in this subsector, the ministers agreed to retain the duty rate at 35% with the corresponding specific rates for imported iron and steel products for a further 1 year.
This is my number, brother. This is my number.
Sector, which is one of
It's
the
also my M-Pesa. Hiyo ndo namba yangu hapo. Kuna mtu ameitisha namba yangu. Hiyo ndo namba yangu bado M-Pesa. That's my number.
Kenya was allowed to apply a rate of 25% on selected fabric products with corresponding specific duty rates in order to curb undervaluation and under-invoicing of imported products. Further,
so that's my
to
number.
ensure competitiveness of textile products that are produced locally.
Nothing, but you'll be
Kenya was
happy.
granted a stay of application and will apply a higher duty of 35%. Mr. Speaker, in order to reduce production cost of animal feeds, Kenya was allowed to extend importation of inputs for manufacturers of animal feeds duty-free under the East African Community Duty Remission Scheme.
Hiyo iko sawa, watu wa animal feeds kama sisi.
So better. Kenya has sufficient supply of hides and skins to meet the demand from local manufacturers of leather and leather products. In order to promote this industry and enhance incomes of our pastoral farmers, the ministers agreed to retain a stay of application.
By the way, you can share like this live stream if you like it.
For Kenya. Mr. Speaker, I have just highlighted a few of the customs measures agreed by East African Community Ministers of Finance. The complete list will be gazetted by the East African Community Secretariat and will become effective starting June 1st, 1st July 2024. Let me now turn to the finance bill, Mr. Speaker.
Hiyo sasa, hiyo ndo tulikuwa tunataka. Hizi zingine zote ni zile advantages watu wamepata. At least I highlight them. Huyo anasoma mbio sana.
Tax policy measures proposed in the finance bill 2024.
Tax policy measures ndo tunataka.
Begin with the proposed amendments to the Income Tax Act.
Income tax.
Value Added Tax, Excise Duty Act, Tax Procedures Act, and miscellaneous.
Na uende pole bana.
Mr. Speaker, let me start with amendments to the Income Tax Act. Currently, retirement benefits, Mr. Speaker, are subjected to tax.
Yes.
This taxation ceases at the age of 65 years. In order to support the retired employees, I propose to amend the Income Tax Act to exempt all retirement benefits paid from the Registered Pension Fund.
Yeah, that's nice.
Registered Provident Fund, Registered Individual Retirement Fund, and National Social Security Fund, and the Public Pension Scheme upon attainment of the retirement age. Mr. Speaker, for the individuals who take up early retirement, this exemption will only apply if the individual has contributed to the pension scheme for a period of 20 years from the date of registration as a member. Mr. Speaker, in addition,
that's nice.
The annual limit of pension contribution that is exempt from tax is 30% of the individual income, or Kenya shillings 240,000, whichever is lower. Considering that this limit has not been revised since 2005, and to encourage savings for social security after retirement, I propose to increase this limit to 360,000 shillings per annum.
That's nice.
Mr. Speaker, I propose to allow deduction contribution to a post-retirement medical fund subject to a limit of Kenya shillings 10,000 per month. This will promote savings for post-retirement healthcare needs. Mr. Speaker,
hiyo sijaelewa but nitaipitia.
Above which withholding tax applies on payments for management fees, professional fees, training fees, and contractual fees is Kenya shillings 24,000 per month. I propose to amend the Income Tax Act to remove this threshold since it creates a room for tax planning and is a challenge to tax administration.
No.
Mr. Speaker, despite the Income Tax Act providing a corporate tax rate of 30%, some taxpayers pay tax at an effective rate of less than 15%. This is due to vigorous tax planning and tax incentives provided under the Act. To prevent this practice, I propose to amend Income Tax Act to introduce a minimum top-up tax payable by a multinational group with a consolidated annual turnover of euro 750 million, whose effective corporate tax rate is below 15%. Mr. Speaker, the spectrum of license fees paid by telecommunication operators are currently not tax deductible, creating unfairness in the tax system. In this regard, I propose to amend the Income Tax Act to allow telecommunications network operators to deduct the spectrum licenses fees over a period of 10 years. Mr. Speaker, advanced pricing agreements have emerged as a valuable tool for preventing tax disputes related to transfer pricing of cross-border transactions. In this regard, I propose to empower the Commissioner to enter into advanced pricing agreement with taxpayers engaged in transactions.
Mimi si engineer bana. Mimi si engineer, Jeffrey Regison. I'm just a contractor.
Kenya, and reinforce Kenya's position as the regional financial hub. I propose to reduce the rate of capital gains tax from 15% to 5%.
That's nice, capital gains.
By the Nairobi International Financial Center of Origin. Mr. Speaker, a transfer of property between an individual and an entity where the individual holds 100% shareholding does not constitute a gain. In this respect, I propose to exclude from capital gains tax this kind of transfer.
That's nice. Capital gains, wow, that's awesome.
Tax was introduced to prevent tax-based erosion occasioned by migration of traditional businesses from physical shops to online platform that is not feasible by the Commission of Tax by the Commissioner for Tax Purposes.
Okay, there are
It
some
has
good
been
things
noted
there.
that the design of the tax does not capture all taxpayers, leading not only to loss of revenue, but also to unfairness in taxation. For this reason, and in line with international best practice, I propose to amend the Income Tax Act to replace the digital service tax with the significant economic presence tax. Mr. Speaker,
Significant.
to expand the tax base and make our country self-reliant, I propose to introduce an annual motor vehicle tax at the rate of 2.5%, the value of the vehicle, subject to minimum amount of Kenya shillings 5,000. Mr. Speaker, let me now turn to gains
Hiyo sasa ni mbaya.
that
Ile
are substantial
2.5
gains for
tax.
Kenyans.
Motor vehicle
Mr.
tax.
Speaker, currently the tax-free amount on subsistence allowance paid to employees in the private sector for a period spent outside the usual place of work while on official duties is capped at Kenya shillings 2,000 per day. This is quite low considering the inflation that has occurred over the years. To cushion employees in the private sector from high cost of living, I propose to review the threshold to an amount not exceeding 5% of the employee's monthly gross earnings. Second, Mr. Speaker, the affordable housing levy and pay as you earn are calculated from the same base, leading to double taxation. To address this, I propose to make the housing levy deductible expense. This means that there is a tax savings for Kenyans and therefore affording Kenyans more money in the pocket. Mr. Speaker, in order to encourage Kenyans to continue constructing their own houses, I propose to increase the limit of interest payments that qualify for mortgage relief from Kenya shillings 300,000 to Kenya shillings 360,000 per annum.
Okay, kuna mambo mzuri,
Let
but
me turn now, Mr. Speaker, to amendments to the value-added tax. Mr. Speaker, I will now highlight the amendments of the value-added tax. Mr. Speaker, currently the registration of VAT is a requirement for a person who makes taxable supplies of Kenya shillings 5 million or more. This threshold was last reviewed in 2007. In recognition to the effects of inflation over the years and to enhance efficiency in tax administration, I propose to increase the threshold to Kenya shillings 8 million. Mr. Speaker, the VAT Act allows taxpayers making both taxable and exempt supplies to claim input tax where the proportion of exempt supplies is less than 10%.
MPs should not pitisha
This
hii
has led
kitu.
to tax planning and hence loss of government revenue. To address this, I have proposed the removal of the threshold so that only the input tax relating to taxable supplies are deductible. Mr. Speaker, in support of the government's effort to combat malaria, I propose to remove VAT on mosquito repellents and raw materials used in the manufacture of repellents. This will encourage local production of the repellents. Mr. Speaker, tax expenditure was estimated at 393.6 billion, or about 2.9% of GDP for the year 2022. Of this amount, VAT tax expenditure amounted to 248.3 billion, or what is 63.1% of the total estimate of tax expenditure, which is a large erosion of the VAT tax.
Nasema wasipitishe.
Mr. Speaker, tax
Just saying
expenditure
wasijaribu
create avenues for
kuipitisha.
revenue leakage and thus denying government the revenue to support key priorities that benefit
Because
the
wakipitisha we are doomed.
of Kenyans, of the citizens in Kenya. Recognizing the importance of tax expenditure in the promotion of investment and addressing welfare challenges in the economy, and in line with the medium-term revenue strategy, I propose to rationalize the VAT tax expenditure as provided for in the VAT Act in form of exemptions and zero rating based on the following criteria. First, that goods currently exempt be subjected to VAT. Second, zero-rated finished goods and consumer goods and services be exempt from VAT. Third, zero rating be restricted to goods
Amefanya watu
taxable
kuerada na
services
hii
only.
finance bill isikue
Based
mandate
on the above,
ingine.
Mr. Speaker,
Akia nani?
based on the above
Uliona watu
criteria, Mr.
wakiambiwa
Speaker, I have
wamepitishwa
proposed several amendments to the first schedule of
an
the
act in
VAT Act in
2016
order to
watakuwa
move
wanalipa
some
rad
goods and
rates bila
services
wao kujua.
from
And
exempt
it's
to
high time
taxable.
we started
In
doing
addition, I have also
making our
proposed
part.
amendments to the second schedule of the VAT Act so that we can move some of the goods and services from zero rating to either exempt status or vatable. This rationalization is expected to expand the VAT tax base and create fairness in taxation.
Okay, that's a good.
Let me
That's
turn
maybe
now to
whatever
the
you're saying is
amendments in the
good,
Excise
but
Duty Act. Mr. Speaker, the tax measures are proposed under excise duty. I propose to change as follows. I propose to change the due date of payment of excise duty on alcoholic beverages from 24 hours within 5 working days after removal from the stockroom. The 24 hours time frame has posed administrative challenges and cash flow, as well as cash flow challenges to the
okay, that
taxpayer.
makes sense.
Mr. Speaker, to protect local assemblies and create fairness and equity in taxation, I propose an introduction of excise duty on imported fully built motorcycle at the rate of 10% of the customs value, in addition to specific tax duty rate of Kenya shillings 12,952.83 cents per unit, whichever is higher. Mr. Speaker, participation in betting, gaming, prize competition, lotteries continues to affect socio-economic fabric of our society, given their addictive
Watu wa
nature.
betting,
Mr. Speaker, last year we raised
watu
the
wa
excise
betting
duty on these
wamefikiwa.
activities from 7.5% to 12.5% to discourage participation. Despite this increase, participation rate in these activities by Kenyan citizens,
Kunoma.
especially
True,
school-going
this is
children,
bad. This is
and
bad.
young adults continues to persist. To further discourage this behavior, I propose to increase the excise duty tax rates to 20%.
Woo.
Mr. Speaker, in line with research findings commissioned by the National Treasury on the taxation of alcoholic beverages, I propose to review the excise duty structure on wines and beer from specific rates per liter to the rate of Kenya shillings 22 shillings and 50 cents per centiliter of pure alcohol. In other words, we want to start taxing alcohol beverages on the basis of alcohol content. Further, I propose to change excise duty rate on spirits from specific rates per liter to Kenya shilling 16 per centiliter of pure alcohol.
Enyewe watu wamejaa, watu mbona watengenezi makazi wenye wanatafuta kila channel za kutafuta tax. Kenyans are tired. Kenyans are tired. Kenyans are tired. Like literally, we are tired.
Behavior of these alcoholic beverages. Mr. Speaker, I also propose to review excise duty structure on cigarettes in line with research conducted and advised that has recommended harmonization of excise duty rates for cigarettes with and without filters at the rate of Kenya shillings 4,100 per mile. This will reduce the incentive for misdeclaration and illicit trade. Mr. Speaker, I propose to increase the excise duty rate from Kenya shillings 1,594.50 cents per kilogram to Kenya shillings 2,000 per kilogram on products containing nicotine or nicotine substitute to address their adverse effects on human health. This excludes those approved medicinal products. Additionally, I propose to increase the excise duty rate on liquid nicotine for electronic cigarettes from Kenya shillings 70 per milliliter to Kenya shillings 100 per milliliter.
Definitely, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that.
To both residents and non-residents offering accessible services, I propose to amend the Excise Duty Act to charge accessible services offered by non-residents through a digital platform. Mr. Speaker, the Finance Act introduced excise duty charged on advertisement of alcoholic beverages, betting, gaming, lotteries, and prize competition on TVs, print media, billboards, and FM stations. This resulted to a shift in choice of advertisement platform from the traditional media to internet and social media. To create a level playing field and to achieve the intended purpose, I propose to expand the scope of this tax to include fees charged on internet and social media advertisements. Mr. Speaker, in order to enhance the administrative efficiency in the issuance of excise licenses to persons dealing with excisable goods or services, I have proposed an amendment to provide for issuance of licenses within 14 working days upon receipt of all required valid documents by the Commissioner. Mr. Speaker, the Finance and
Hapana, si co-host amekam. Ni mwenye nyumba ameingia.
Duty on imported eggs, potatoes, onions at the rate of 25%.
Si co-host ameingia, ni mwenye nyumba ameingia.
The removal of this excise duty on imported eggs, potatoes, and onions originating from East African Community Partner States, subject to goods meeting the East African Community Rules of Origin. Mr. Speaker, currently, excise duty is 15% on the following: telephone, internet data services, fees charged on money transfer services, fees charged on money transfer by agencies and other financial services providers, and the fees charged on cellular phone service providers. I propose to retain the excise duty rate of 15% on fees charged on money transfer services by cellular phone service providers to benefit retail electronic payments ecosystem.
Oof, that's very
Now
high.
move to amendments to Tax Procedures Act. Mr. Speaker, I will now highlight those proposed amendments of the Tax Procedures Act. Currently, there is no validity period for the agency notices issued for enforcement of correction of unpaid taxes. This gap often leads to tax disputes and delayed revenue correction. To address this, I propose to amend the Tax Procedures Act to provide 1 year validity period for agency notices. Mr. Speaker, in order to align the timelines for claiming VAT and in the Tax Procedures Act and VAT Act, I propose to delete the reference on timeliness for claiming refunds at the VAT Act, so that the applicable timeline is the 6 months that is provided under the Tax Procedures Act.
Yeah, tutafanya breakdown
Mr.
after
Speaker,
this.
currently,
I just decided to share these, and after 1 hour, nitaenda gather my thoughts, and I listen to it another time,
$3 million are
and
exempted
then I will
from
share to
withholding
you,
tax.
especially
In order to
part ya
promote
mwisho.
equity and create fairness to all manufacturers, I propose to amend the Tax Procedures Act to remove this exemption. Mr. Speaker, I propose to amend the Tax Procedures Act to clarify that enforcement and correction of taxes will be undertaken where a decision of the tribunal or court is in favor of the commissioner, and stay orders have not been obtained against the decision. Mr. Speaker, the 60 days provided to the commissioner in the Tax Procedures Act to review documents submitted by the taxpayers in support of an objection of tax assessment by the commissioner are not adequate. To ensure comprehensive review, and in order to give the commissioner adequate time, I propose to extend the timelines to object decisions of the commissioner from 60 days to 90 days. Let me now move to amendments to miscellaneous fees and levies. Mr. Speaker, last year, 17.5% export and investment promotion levy was introduced
imemake
on
nishtuke
imported goods
that these guys
that
hata hawana
are
huruma.
produced in adequate quantities. In the Finance Bill 2024, the list of goods has been expanded and the rate of the levy has been reduced to 3% for most of the goods and others 10%. Mr. Speaker, in order to facilitate the National Intelligence Service to carry out its mandate, I propose to amend the Miscellaneous Fees and Levies Act to exempt the National Intelligence Service from payments of import declaration fee and railway development levy on security equipment and motor vehicles imported or purchased locally for official use. Mr. Speaker, the high production and importation of hazardous goods, particularly electrical and electronic devices, into the country has led to significant increases in electronic waste. We call it e-waste in Kenya. This surge in waste production poses a considerable risk to both the environment and human health. In this regard, I propose to introduce eco-levy on various products to be payable in line with
Guys,
the
you can ask me
polluter pays
questions by the way. Feel free to ask me any question after about this. I will come back after 1 hour after I gather every information I have
Let me turn
and
to
talk
the
about
amendments
it.
to the Kenya
Just
Revenue
ask me
Authority
any question that
Act.
you have.
Mr. Speaker,
You
to
can ask
enhance
any
public
question
knowledge
you
and
feel like.
literacy on tax matters, I propose to amend the Kenya Revenue Act to enable Kenyans
Very
Bureau
true.
of Revenue
Very
Administration
true.
collaborate
Very
with other
true.
institutions
Hapo
in
Anthony
Kenya,
Karungu umeongea
develop
ukweli.
curricula, assess, examine students, and award
Atasema
certificates
ni gari
in
za
tax
security
matters.
wao.
I submitted this amendment in a separate bill. In conclusion, Mr. Speaker,
That's very true.
the government, under the leadership of His Excellency, the President, Honorable Dr. William Samoei Ruto, has succeeded in steering the economy through a very difficult period of global and domestic challenges. Remarkably, the economy has recovered from the lagged effects of COVID-19 pandemic and unwinding from persistent and successive domestic and external shocks that created some permanent effects. Mr. Speaker, the policies and structural reforms outlined in this budget have laid a firm foundation to protect the fragile recovery for a sustained socio-economic transformation. Financing development is critical to this economic transformation. That is why raising adequate revenues is a core pillar to this economic transformation and growth. I'm confident that these measures will create jobs. They will strengthen economic recovery, and they will reduce the cost of living in the country, thereby providing the much needed relief to the common wananchi.
That's a
I
lie.
therefore urge
The
honorable
biggest
members
lie I've
and all
said.
Kenyans to support the implementation
Yani
of the
uongo
measures
mtupu.
contained in this
That's
budget
a huge
for
lie
our
than you
mutual
think.
prosperity. Finally, Mr. Speaker, achieving prosperous Kenya requires leadership
Nani
and support
anakunywanga
of every
ujipawa?
Kenyan.
Hii ni
For this
ujipawa na
reason, I
kunya.
wish to thank His Excellency the President, Dr. William Samoei Ruto, and His Excellency the Deputy President, Honorable Rigathi
That's
Gachagua,
yeah,
for their
hii Anthony
continued
unaongea
wise
ukweli.
guidance and leadership
Hii yote
through
ni uongo
perseverance,
mtupu.
long hours of
These
work
guys are bigger liars than you
against
think.
odds. My special appreciation goes to Prime Cabinet Secretary, the Attorney General, my fellow Cabinet Secretaries, and the respective principal secretaries and accounting officers and staff of all MDAs for their support and contribution
Rigathi hajatajwa.
to the financial year 2024-2025
Ametaja
budget
Prime
making process
Secretary peke
and
yake.
contributions to these budget proposals.
Hii Kenya
My
inakuwa na
sincere
jokes.
appreciation also goes to first to you, Honorable Speaker of the
Ama ni
National
mimi
Assembly,
nimesikia vibaya.
and your counterpart in the Senate, the majority and minority leaders of the entire House leadership, including respective clerks, for overseeing the approval process of the budget estimates for the financial year 2024-2025 and related documents. Second, to honorable chairs, members of both Budget and Appropriation Committee and Finance and National Planning Committee,
These guys are not serious.
and all the other departmental
seriously, these guys are serious.
of this House, as well as of the staff of the Parliamentary Budget Office, for their constructive input, excellent leadership during the approval process and the discussions that we have had in the process of these budget proposals. Third, let me thank my colleagues, the National Treasury and Economic Planning, led by Dr. Chris Kipto, the Principal Secretary, and the National Treasury, and James Mohati, the Principal Secretary of Economic Planning, State Department.
Mesikia Rigathi ametajwa, na yeye amesikia Rigathi akitajwa. Mimi sijasikia.
Preparation of this budget process, including their own leadership in their own MDAs. Fourth, I want to thank the management and staff of the Central Bank of Kenya, Kenya Revenue Authority, Financial Sector
Meanwhile, everyone's planning to do construction. Avoid taking your wife to site during foundation. Saina jenga 272 meter square house after hustling and gets her pongeza.
Development partners for their continued technical and financial support. And further, I thank the private sector for its sustained contribution to the discussions we have had to support.
Hata niachane na hii budget guys, I just want to leave the budget alone for now. Acha tuongee facts. You know, there are so many things that ameongea na I'm just amazed how out of touch these guys are. I'm just amazed. Okay, kuna vitu mzuri hapo juu alikuwa anaongezea, tutapunguza capital gains tax, ile digital economy tax unaipunguza. There are those parts ameongea, but history ya taxation na zero, unajua. Okay, wait, let me just go back, gather my thoughts. Nikam sasa na a good way, a good way kuelezea what I've understood with the budget, and nitafanya right from 7. I just need to go gather, nikam ni present what nimesikia, because sijasikia construction imetajwa na pia sijasikia Rigathi imetajwa. Those are at least kuna hizo na by the way, history ya Budhaira anasema, meanwhile anyone planning to do construction avoid taking your wife to site during foundation. Saa hii inajenga 272 meter square house after her saying ongeza hapa. True, be careful. Unajua nyumba yangu ni 44 meter square na 272 si ni kubwa. It's 6 times my house. True, lakini hakuna kitu ya construction inaongezwa bei. That's true, sijasikia. Lakini wamekuwa wakizigonga, wamekuwa wakiziongezea for a long time, pengine this time waliona waekae. Amtambuliwi Raudi. Jacob said he is tuned in. Thank you Jacob for watching. And yeah, right now I just want to go gather my thoughts, and then anywhere between 6:30 to 7 I'll be back and share my thoughts about the finance bill yenye hiyo budget, hizo taxation zimeongezewa. Yeah, hapa kuna mtu anasema Sira Zawadi, Wakikuyu wamtabuli Rodi. Hiyo ni Rigathi mpaka Minister of Finance hajamtambua bana. That was unique. Anyway, guys, thank you for watching. Yeah, thank you for watching with me. At least hata kama it was fun, it was something fun. Yeah, nimefurahia kuwatch na nyinyi. Ati finance bill ni poa. Nani yeye anasema finance bill ni poa? We Titan, hakuna uzuri wa hii finance bill. Let me go back and gather my thoughts about this. But this is amazing. Oof. These people are out of touch. So guys, thank you. Cheers, and thank you for watching. I'll be back by 6:30 to 7. Let's say 7. By 7. Let's just watch it to amue 7. At least niweze kujipanga vizuri. Thank you. See you then.